All right.
I must say I'm jealous
Welcome,
of
everyone.
seeing Dior standing there in his shorts.
I know.
No, thank you.
It is
On
a
his
And
tease.
days off, it's
I've got a
playing with
thermal
posters.
top on under this.
I'm just glad he's wearing shorts
Oh, good. Yeah,
this time.
true. Okay.
I was
A
glad.
little bit too much information, but
Yeah,
thanks.
exactly. That's a good way to start the episode.
Yeah,
Welcome,
sorry.
everyone. Uh, um, so this week, as with every week, we can always start with something that you might be wrestling with. Always want to make sure that right at the start, if someone's like, "I'm trying to work this out. How do I do this?" We want to make that um, option available straight away. Um, I've actually got one I want to talk to Fleur about. We're thinking about co-presenters. So it's interesting the different terminology because I often think about it from um, even an abstract where it's an author and then a co-author or a presenting author and then a
hmm
co-presenting author, so multiple presenting authors.
hmm
And the way that the emails go out. So I'm interested how you would manage a large. So if you have a session, but you just want a presentation that's got multiple presenting authors or presenters, um, who would get the email? Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
this is
What?
definitely something that's been a hot topic of recent times for me with a
Mm,
couple of clients because the system is only set up to email the submitting author when the
mm,
abstract submission goes through. And so often there's more than that person that needs that email, and it's
mm,
presenting authors. And quite a few clients I work with do symposia where you've got 6 or 7 different presenting authors and it's submitted by one person. And we've been workshopping how to get the communications to go to those people. Like, how do we do that? Because at the moment, the abstract submission portal just isn't set up for that. And though it will put into their events area record them as a presenting author, like presentation author, you can't then pull, even though you could filter potentially on everyone who's a presenting author and send them a it's not going to pull their presenter details into that
mm,
merge doc for the people. So you're really relying on the submitting author to forward the information on to their co-presenters. But we've been workshopping, I haven't landed at this yet, but been workshopping using a contact form with the functions module to capture submitting authors. Because when you set up the functions module in a form online, you can set it to auto send an email when you do that. Look, the way that you do if you buy multiple tickets to a dinner, you can have it automatically send off. So potentially, while you still wouldn't be able to bring in their individual presentation time, what you could do is have an email that had the speaker briefing notes attached to it and a link to the program so that they can go, you can say, you're in, you're presenter, we recognize you're a co-presenter, please click here to read the speaking briefing notes. The main presenter presentation timing information has been sent to your submitting author, something like that. It's not ideal. The ideal would be that they rebuild that presentation portal module, which I know is on the cards for events here at the
mm,
moment, that it would do the magic things that would happen. 2 things: that when you say how many presenting authors and I tick on that I've got 3, it would drop down with 3 bios and 3 places to put emails for correspondence, and then all 3 would get that communication. But until that comes into play, I'm playing around with that functions module, knowing the functionality of the function code being doing an auto email of whether there's something in that. And it might also be a way of capturing bios potentially or other contact. Like, at least you're going to get the position, organization, title, you can get that in there. So kind of using the function allocation in a different way. So haven't had the success on it yet, but that's where the thought process is going, and it just happens to be something I'm workshopping for someone else at the moment.
Oh my God, I'm totally in this space at the moment as well with a client.
Yeah.
That sounds like an amazing idea. Could you put it in the initial contact form? Or would you,
Yeah,
yeah, is that
you
what you
could.
mean?
You could, or you
And
could
then,
send one, or you could do it post review and say for the only to those who are accepted,
yeah,
and
right.
then send them out a link. The submitting author, send them a link that has, like, in the acceptance letter, this is your acceptance, this is the time you've been allocated to speak. Now, because you're a symposia or whatever, we need to capture your co-author information so that we can send them the speaker briefing notes as well and keep them informed. Because even things like making sure that those co-authors are registered, because
Yeah.
when you register through the presenter portal, it's only the submitting author that's going to be linked in there and come back into there. So I think there's something in it, Francie. I just haven't.
Got there.
It's
Yeah.
literally been on my to do for a client to work out a system, and I think that's what it is. And I think it's on accepting the submission that then the next steps is that we need to capture these, and immediately when they put in their details, it will flick off the speaker briefing notes to those people. It's
So I have
really frustrating that there's not a merge doc component to pull in the presentation author, because you really want them to be able to see very quickly and simple without having to replicate the whole presentation into their record, because that's just way too manual. But you really want to be able to tell them this is when speaking. So yeah,
So with
I guess I'll
invited,
keep playing with it and then
yeah.
report back to you. Like, we're literally going to trial it very, very soon with a client that's got a lot of symposia. So
Can I
in the
ask
next month.
Can I ask a question about the symposia?
Mm,
Because it's kind
yeah,
of related. I've got a client who their symposia, they have like an overarching submission symposia title, and then every presenter, up to 3 presenters under that, will have their own presentation titles.
yeah.
Cannot figure out how to do it.
You're really going to have to capture those through an abstract submission portal as well, then, aren't
Yeah, but
you?
how do you
Link them together?
yeah. Because I thought about having like the symposia title as part of that
Session.
context. The what, sorry?
You could have the symposia title as a session, and then the individual presentations underneath
Sit
it as
within that.
papers.
Yeah, but when they're submitting an abstract,
When they're submitting, yeah.
there's no way to, because I
So-
tried doing it so that they had like a custom field for the titles, for the extra
Yeah.
titles, but then it's extra work, right? Because then you've got to then transfer that
Yes.
accepted. And if you have all of the, because I thought about having the individual, the overarching presentation submitted during the contact process if they were only submitting one symposium, and then each presentation under it submitted as a separate thing. But then when if the reviewers use the reviewer portal, they see all the presentations as different names, so there's no way to easily link them unless I use the spreadsheet, which is what I was thinking.
Yeah. I mean, every client I work with Symposia, they expect them to collate it into one document, and we submit it as a full Symposia that has all of the papers within that one document. So they do a Word doc, but it might have 6 pages because it's got an individual page for each presentation, because the reviewer wants to review it as a full Symposia.
Okay. Might have to go down that route.
It's just but it's again comes back to, when they're reworking that presenter module, that's a really relevant question to be asked, and that's something that we can feed back, is that the way that symposia are captured, because potentially you've got 5 different people submitting different papers that all fall into that same branch, and it depends on how organized they are to get them all together into one document.
Okay.
Yeah.
No easy way then.
No. No, I wish I could give you a different answer.
Oh good.
Just no.
Just no.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'll let you know, like, I'll update you guys through this forum as to how that little trial goes
Yeah.
with it. And that's just a tool to get the comms going to right people, and then being able to filter on that function module when I'm sending any speaker comms that might go out afterwards, after the fact, to make sure they all get communicated to. Yeah, because submitting authors are notoriously bad at actually sharing information with the people that they're co-presenting with.
Yeah.
They're just like, it's like Jedi mind tricks. You're supposed to just know what they're doing.
Well, I
Yeah.
guess it's the same when they're invited, as in if they're being manually entered in to EA, whoever it's attached to, whoever it was first assigned to is the submitting author in a way.
Yeah.
And so then that becomes the same issue. Even if you're able to manually enter it, it still becomes an issue.
Mm.
It's a tricky one because of how it flows on for us, in that we connect it to our presentation file management system for
Mm.
getting people to upload their presentations. Well, the good thing is that every one of the if they're marked as presenting, then they will get the upload link. So if there's a co-authors, they'll both get the upload link, through a separate system, right? But we still want to communicate with them through EA first to say, this is what you're doing, and you're going to be in this session role. You're a chair of this session, and then you're a co-presenter in this session. And of course, it just won't show up for that. It doesn't show them that they're a co-presenter in that if they aren't the submitting author or the one that it's attached to. Yeah, it is a problem.
It is, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I certainly am involved with a couple of large conferences that have 100 symposia and then 500 or 600 individual presenters as well. And that's why we're trialing this, because we're like, we've got to be able to communicate with these people. You've potentially got 500 people across that 100 symposia,
yeah.
and 400 aren't getting any emails.
Mm,
So it's a lot, yeah.
mm.
So it didn't really
Yeah.
answer your question, Grant, but it's just
No,
it's an
well,
in
it does.
progress. And
It
I guess
does,
it's
as in,
my thing that I love about events there is sometimes looking at the functionality of a module rather than what that module is designed for. And the functions module has some really interesting functionality. For a client that remain nameless, but is probably sitting in the room here. We looked at we implemented using the function table allocation to do gown collection this year, because it's all about being able to allocate people to groups. So we had the inventory of gowns as tables, a table for the small of this type of gown and a table for the large of this type of gown. And we're able to drag and drop people onto the gowns and then be able to provide them with comms that said, this is what gown number you're collecting, and have the scan in, scan out functionality when they collect their gowns. And that was using the functionality of a module, but maybe not what it was originally. We're using table allocation, but not for a dinner. But I've done the same thing with the functions module years and years and years ago. We're talking over 20 years ago, when I was in New Zealand, and I looked after the Girl Scout jamboree, the Scouts and Girl Guides jamboree, and we had 10,000 scouts come to this one location, all in tents and beds, and they had to be allocated to a bunk bed within these tents, and 10,000 people. And rather than use accommodation, we ended up using the functions module and being able to drag and drop the kids into the beds in the tents, and had this whole plan of this massive location that they were doing this camp. And it was just even way back then, 20 years ago, saying immediately people would think use the accommodation module because we're doing accommodation, but it was really about grouping. So the functions module made sense. So yeah, that's where my geeky brain gets excited, I guess.
that's great. It's a great use case for it. And they're like, I'm
Yeah.
sleeping on a table. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah, exactly. I know. Yeah, it was funny. The seats were the beds, the tables
Yeah,
were the tents. We grouped them
yeah,
into sections within,
it
and to
works.
do able to pull tent by bed lists for everybody, and it just was so much more efficient than working in the accommodation module for that.
Yep,
It's interesting.
yep. It's a great use
Yeah,
case.
that was a sidetrack, but
No, it's
yeah, I
good.
guess the
It is.
message there is don't be limited by what a module might be designed for. Look at what, people were talking in a recent session about using the present abstract submission portal for awards management. Absolutely can be used for that kind of thing. It's what does that module do, and what do I need to achieve, and what module fits best for what I want to achieve. Yeah. Does anyone
It's
else have
great.
a burning question for the day before we?
Mm.
I do. I'm
Yeah.
keen to find out. I was chatting with Fleur just prior to everyone coming in, and I want to just expand on that in regards to the live Q&A app. We use that. We display it on a tablet and we hand it to the chairs. We run it at our AV desks, of course, and then we put it to screen, whether it's on the main screen or whether it's on the downstage monitor for the panel to see the questions coming in. But the dang thing constantly freezes and you have to go out and come in and refresh, right? And so I remember a year or so ago, like I logged a whole bunch of tickets and we kind of arrived at, it doesn't like iPads. Go and you buy some Windows device. So I went and bought a bunch of devices. And of course, the same problem happens. And I'm just curious if people are experiencing the same thing, whether we can gang up and get it resolved. What we do know is this: more and more of our events are leaning into the mobile app and using the Q&A. And I'll park the argument about having sufficient time to actually get to all the questions, because if you're going to ask the audience to do it, you should at least give them the courtesy of responding to them. But they're doing it, right? They're all on doing it, getting all the questions in there, and you skim through however many you can jam into the end. But it's problematic when the questions aren't automatically just appearing on the device. So we've got a range of workarounds. Take your mobile device. I can remote dial into the device nowadays and refresh it myself. But of course, that throws a chair when they're on stage and they see the screen starting to move around. Anyone else having the same problem? Anyone found a solution around that in the interim? Or am I on my own?
We use the
Kind of,
Q&A module, but we haven't had that issue. But to be fair, we only use it for very small events. Like there'd be maximum 200 to 300 people at the event using it.
Right.
Yeah.
Small numbers.
We have
Annabelle,
had.
it's probably your time to shine here, my friend.
Hey, I'm not program. All I know is the feedback I've been given from program that yes, it does happen. Yeah.
Right.
And they are larger conferences usually, and probably the Q&A app is being used in multiple rooms at the same time. And yeah, we do have issues.
Maybe it's just Australia.
Hey, you guys are fine. Kiwis are brilliant.
Is a server boost? I don't know. My server boost is the only thing that comes to my head. Does that ever make any difference, or have you not had it?
I haven't. We did a really big show through some partner of ours in the US, in Texas, and they had the same problem. So server boost over there, offloaded by the fact that they've got ridiculous internet connection. I don't know. I'll have to ask that question, but that's possibly a good point.
I've never been told that iPads are not the go.
Yeah, we've always used iPads.
I know, right?
Yeah, so I'm surprised to hear that was the feedback. I wonder if that's a feedback of clutching, like not really sure what's wrong here, so let's just go with an iPad issue. It just seems a really odd, given that everything is so Apple device friendly. It's surprising to me that would be the advice given.
Yeah.
But yeah, it certainly does freeze. It's a bit frustrating. And also found sometimes you won't be able to see the questions even that you've asked on the app. But that might have improved with the new app. But in the old app, some questions showing, even regardless whether you've chosen moderation or not, some showing and some not. So it's definitely been a bit glitchy.
bit glitchy, and I've got fat fingers, maybe, I don't know, but the buttons, when you click a question, you want to tick it or star it, they are really small icons. And so you can imagine someone on stage even on a 12-inch device, something reasonable size, it's highly probable they're going to click the wrong thing, right?
And also the fact that they're so far away, like if someone's got a short question, you've got to I find it really hard to track across to which ones they are.
Yeah, good point. Okay. So maybe I'll just rally more support leading into airtime, and then when we're on site, we can arm wrestle this point and get it across the line. See how we go.
It's a good example of the where my head goes is, give me access to those chat questions through the API, and then I can build our own system to manage it. But it's not necessarily. I think there is something to be said about. I remember James was saying this at one point, that he feels like the product is there's so many different modules that it's difficult for them to maintain all of them and to keep making improvements on them all. And there's some things where they're sort of reinventing the wheel, where there are other services out there that already handle it, and so why would they develop something else? Which says to me that there were some things that they would recommend using another service for, and then integrate with it, and away it goes. Project management jumps to mind as an example, and I think he even said that it wasn't an area that they're going to push more into. They're more likely to make sure that products like Asana or all the other ones can integrate with it, so that you can do project management connected with EA without having to do all of your project management through it. And I wonder whether question management might be one of those as well, in that there might be other systems that can handle it better. And it does seem to be a timeout issue, and there's no indicator that it's timed out, and that I think that's the hard thing.
But I think whatever they do, they're going to need it to be. It'll need to be through, ideally through the system, because it integrates with the app, and that's where people are using it to. So But they did talk about eventually maybe having an app that is not an events air app, like an Entergy app or something, and maybe that had a more sophisticated system. But obviously the way it feeds into the sessions, and that's what controls it all. But it's the same with live polling. It freezes. It's not. It's a great offering, but it's not a perfect offering. It's
there's funny ones too with the with the token login. So with the chat, the Q&A, you can use a token login to log in to that, right? So you can go to an attendee, and it will log you in, and you're now in the Q&A to be able to
moderate
to
be
able
serious?
to moderate it.
You've taught me something. I did not know that, because you have to set up users on that app. I've never even thought to try that. That's a bit of a hack, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice. Well, it's nice because now you've just got one link you can use, and it'll take you straight in. But the polling app doesn't do that. And so it's just an interesting, and it could be that it's accidental that it's working on the Q&A login, but it's those sorts of things that are really handy, because that, particularly when it's timing out and you want to reload it, you don't want to log in again, right? You just want to, and sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. So it's things like that if they can continue to use a token login, then now you can make it on startup, it will open that without having to log in. So things where you can avoid logging in and use a token to log in is great.
Yeah, I've probably never noticed it, because I've always just naturally set myself
Never
up as a user every time I've created one, because I know I'm going to have to jump into it at some point. But I mean, I do think it's great that to be able to collect the questions. I find that often you run out of time in the session, but some clients particularly will want to provide the presenters with those questions post, and then they will reach out and answer them. So I think it's valuable to be able to collect them. But I have other clients who don't want to go that technology route at all and still do the old handheld mics in the rooms. It's interesting to see that there are still some people that go in that direction, but not very many.
Yeah, we see that it's very efficient to have text questions,
Definitely.
And there's a couple of things that I think about that. One of those is that I do think it's important to read the names of people that ask the question, and also to read the question verbatim. And so there's nothing about events there. It's just philosophy for me, because people have taken the time to word it in a particular way, and I think it adds to the interaction of the event to say the names of people that have said it, and to honour them by reading it in the same way that they wrote it, even if if it's not quite right or whatever. That's what they've written, and so you honour them by reading that. So the worst thing that you can do, I think, is, we've got 3 questions that are all basically the same, and they're saying something like this. And what happens is you haven't acknowledged any of the 3 people, and you also you've also assumed that they're similar, and now you just kind of get people's nose out of joint, I think, when they do that sort of thing. So it's just a different sort of philosophy with it. But I also think, and this is another soapbox for me, and I won't get right on top of it, but that is that events, information has changed. It used to be that events were ran, and that you could not get the world's information unless you were at that event. Like, that's how you learnt about things, is going to that event and hearing that presenter share, right? Well, now all of that information, or a lot of it, is online, is accessible. It might be recorded. It's all available. So that's a very different thing. And so I encourage, when I'm talking to clients, to think about what is the priority of an event now. Never has it been more important to get people together to actually interact and to be engaging and networking, and do we really need to come together and just hear content? That content can be available before the event starts, anytime, it's available afterwards, it's all of that. But yet still we run our events as if that content is not available anywhere, and it can only happen in real time with everyone sitting and listening at the same time. Whereas the way that we consume content now is different for everyone. Some people would like to consume it at 2 times the speed. Some people want to do it at half times. Some people want to go back over it, And so there's a strong argument to say, let's maximize the time that we have for questions. Let's make content available before the event starts. 2 weeks before, here's a bunch of recordings to listen to, and then let's come together and have panel discussions and case studies and Q&A, and you maximize the time for Q&A. So anyway, that's a massive industry to try to turn around, because mostly what we do is, as you said, Fleur, there's nearly always questions hanging there, because inevitably presenters go over, and you had 10 minutes and now that's 2 minutes. Now we get one question and now we're rushing off to go do something else,
It's
because we
interesting
just
though, as a sideline to it and through Q&A. Recently I was on live support for an event that was hybrid, and I was doing the online support, and we had about 800 online delegates and about 1,200 in person. And I was getting particularly one man who complained all the time because this question wasn't being acknowledged by the chair. And I said, oh, you know, most of the sessions have run over today, and most of them had. But he was like, well, that one finished 8 minutes early, and they didn't answer my question that he'd put in through on air. And I then passed that feedback on to the chair of that room and said, could you please, and I actually ended up getting the presenter to contact that delegate just to appease him a bit. But what it highlighted to me is that it's been a really interesting time in the industry with hybrid, and I think we are moving further back to on-site face-to-face because people want that human connection, absolutely. But there is still an element of conferencing that is doing on demand, and whether that's watching afterwards or watching live. When there's watching live, a smaller percentage are now actually watching live and more are watching post. But for those that are watching live, we've come to expect that live interaction now. That's the world that we're in now, post-COVID. And I felt that almost without exception, the session chairs didn't acknowledge the online audience. And I sat there and thought, there's 800 of almost half, 40% are sitting here watching this from home. And we need to get better. The chairs and the presenters need to get better at acknowledging their online virtual audience, even for on demand, even just a line, welcome to our people online, or if the session's running late, get up and it's already started online. So you need to get up and acknowledge, we won't be long, we'll be starting soon. And that's all they need to go, oh, I'm valued and I'm here. And it kind of feeds into your like reading a question out and acknowledging the person's name, is that it's a really strange conference world that we live in now, that we have some people watching this from their living room at 2 a.m. and we almost, I think we're going the other way now that we forget that they're there.
Yeah, we did a hybrid event, interesting, a few years ago, just before COVID actually, and the online audience had an online MC. So we had two. We had an in-person MC and an online MC, and they tag teamed it. And there are bits where the online would be like, close your eyes, people are here, and he'd put a big sign up for those participating online. It was very cool. It was all around UX, but I mean, that's probably a bit the other extreme. But yeah, really cool idea. So much engagement with both, and the in-person group were like, this is hilarious, you know, like being part of something as well.
Yeah, because even like gamification in the app, you know, I've got a client that I work with and they're very heavy on gamification, but they really didn't cater to their online audience. You know, in person they had like 1,500 and online they only had 300, but still those people are paying. So find some ways of using gamification to engage them and make, otherwise every time in the keynote session when you're talking about the trivia prizes or the you know, the location scan prizes that there are, those people are feeling like, well, am I not even part of this? So it's a really strange balance to, I don't know, we've got to find the balance there on that. And as much as we love our in-person attendees, you actually make money on the on-demand attendees because they're the ones who don't cost you anything. You know, they don't cost you catering, they don't cost you any physical things. So it's a good revenue stream, and it should be, I think, encouraged because it's, you know, very easy to facilitate from a, you know, if you add that into your AV budget, it really doesn't take a lot to make a conference hybrid. And I think that people expect it now. They do. Personally, I can't think of anything worse than going to a whole conference online. That would, for me, I'm not that person, you know. I was never a wanting to sit in lectures person either. I don't enjoy, it's so funny as an event manager, I don't actually enjoy being a delegate. I don't find, it doesn't float my boat.
You're right.
Do you know? It's funny.
Ali,
like I like to run it. I don't like to listen.
Ali's being polite. Just dive in. What do you want to say?
Oh, I just have a question, really, just with I like the idea of the online MC, which obviously increases the engagement and all that. But on the flip side, does it sound like you're actually producing two shows at the same time? So then how much more actual work and the amount of effort that you want to go in. And I agree with Fleur, it is free money for us. And then it's obviously, the more the merrier. But then if you factor in your staff resources online, and on site to have to cater for it, would have then I suppose it would still come out cost effective, but how much more work are we going to have to do?
To brief that
Yeah,
MC.
I love that they're feeling loved, and we want them to feel loved, but to what degree?
First of all, EJ, I love the fact that you mentioned the example that you were doing hybrid some time ago. We still to this day think it's absolutely critical because you are running 2 events. And so,
Yes,
Ali,
totally.
to your point, we've often referred to it as, what is it, Grant, an amphibious vehicle? Hybrid events are an amphibious vehicle, right? They don't really drive that well and they don't really float that well, but they do both unless you do it properly and treat it like 2 separate events. And you're right, Ali, you got to be really bloody good to be able to knock it out and think you can do both without approaching it with the idea of having 2 standalone productions that need to work simultaneously. Otherwise, someone feels left out, right? You often have an MC in person that's talking to the audience and engaging with them and moving at their time that works for the live audience. Well, that doesn't work for people online, right? You've got to wait for them, and there could be sync things, and they've got to throw to them from time to time. It's kind of broadcast showcraft, right? That's been happening for years in TV world. You always have an anchor at the studio, and then they throw to the people live, and they come back, and then they go down to the side of the field or whatever it is they're doing. But there's always someone to quarterback it all. And in corporate events, EJ, your example is spot on. You've got to treat it as 2 separate events, or there's going to be someone feeling like they're at the small kid table at dinner, right? They're not quite feeling part of the whole program. And so, but you can do it. Ali, you can do it. With some pre-programming and having someone to anchor and run it, do that online element. But just looking at the program well in advance, like you don't have to do it heavy-handed because there is crossover. App support could be the same people that are supporting the online support. You don't have to double down too much on resourcing, but there needs to be some consideration for the program and how it's run. The time I remember doing awards stuff. I think it was for a music thing that we're doing. So they take a bit of time to walk up to the stage and there's music playing and they stop and hug and chat. Well, online, that doesn't translate too well unless you've got a wide shot of the room and you can see them doing it. But then it's a dark room. So now the production had to go up so we could see them. And so there are definitely things you've got to do. Otherwise, it just feels a bit naff. And so in that example,
I've done it. I've live MC'd on air.
Was it
and
fun?
it's stressful, but the balance of it is because I was also live support. I was doing the going live to screen on air through the control room doing it, but it was a balance of that our in-person MC was doing all the intros and stuff like that, and I would jump in when we went to breaks and talk to the online audience about how they could enjoy their break because they're not getting buffet lunch provided for them. So I would just be like, this is a great time to go and put your dishwasher on if you haven't already. And I just randomly came up with whatever I could. But I was very conscious that because you've got an MC and they're watching a live stream of the conference and they're seeing all the sort of main content, you didn't want to do it too intrusively. You didn't want to do it too often. It was more just like where there was a bit of dead space and you needed to just jump in and, potentially your on-site MC could also do that to your virtual audience. Could jump in at the end of a session going into a break when they're not on stage. They could jump into a control room in your building and jump in and talk to your virtual. And Ali, it's only if you're doing a live virtual though, not if you're doing just an on-demand. You wouldn't have it for that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and that's what I was going to say about it. It is 2 events, and so so from a budget point of view, of course, it is less than your in-person event, but it still is a significant. It needs to be a significant amount to make it worthwhile for the online audience. The question always is when you live stream anything, is why does it need to be live? And generally, there's 3 key reasons that you would live stream. Breaking news, like an award ceremony or something like that. It's breaking news. Sport is because of gambling and all that sort of stuff. And the third one is it's highly interactive. And so generally what lots of the conferences and events that we're doing, they're not breaking news really. Like the fact that it could be made available a couple of days later is not a big deal. They're not sport. There's no one gambling on some of these events, and they're questionably how engaging are they, interactive are they? Because if you program it in such a way that you only have 2 minutes for questions, chances are that people are not really feeling like they're gaining that much from that time anyway. So
Yeah, correct.
why are we doing these two events at the same time? And so because you can take the content from a live event and repackage it into an online event where you can still play out the content. There's lots of options, but you could play out the content and people are watching it and then have good question time. You can ask your panelists to come back during that time. You know, there's all those sorts of options. Or like an on-demand / live panel. So you make all of your content available on demand, and 2 weeks later you have a live online event for a few hours and you just do panels and questions. Now that serves your live audience as well as your on-demand audience. That the people that were in person, they can also come back in 2 weeks' time and do like an encore, you know, and so it's a cool approach to, instead of doing hybrid, you create an on-demand live experience that's focused on just serving that online audience. So it's
I feel
as an
like there's
encore
also a level of the delegate expectations as well. I suppose, you know, we all dive into the whole live streaming and everything because we had to, because COVID happened.
Correct.
And so there wasn't ever a discussion of why we're trying to do this or what we want to achieve or what the scope is. And so I think some of you might share the same experiences, that when we first started doing the live streaming, the delegates have the idea that it should be the same as they're in person,
right.
but it's not. It's a completely different production. They should have different expectations, but they've never been taught probably or educated as to why it needs to be different. You know, even the live streaming of the award shows that we did that stupidly 4 years ago across 7 states, that was not good. And it's very hard for me to explain to people why there's a 10-second delay from what they're watching from Melbourne versus WA. And it's like, it's just, that's how broadcasting work. So I think there's that level of how we can rank those expectations back
in.
Yeah, so, you know, going back to your example, Fleur, earlier about that one delegate who kept asking why my question is not, like, you know, if you're in person, you stand right there. Yes, your question will be answered.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's not the same when you type it in. Is it, you know?
Yeah.
That's just
and look,
different.
there's different examples for every client's going to be different in what they need. You know, some clients have a delegation who will take that time off that the live conference is on. They'll take that time from work, and that's when they're going to want to watch it. There are other clients who that's tied into CPD, and the timing of their conference is that we need to capture their live attendance on the day to get their CPD. I have a client who does half and half. They can attend live, and then for 6 weeks afterwards, they can watch the records and they can earn CPD for watching the records. And then there's a whole reporting process that comes in there, because when you watch a session record at the moment and on air, that doesn't come through to your agenda in events air. So that becomes quite a manual reporting, well, an Excel experience to get all the data out and get it into, you know, their membership system and make that work. With, you know, probably looking at smart connectors and an option for that. But it's interesting to see the different ways. And for, you know, for that client, it's really no difference in price because they bring a technology company in to do the vision. So they have a vision tech in every room doing a vision mixed record, and then that record is then straight away just edited straight up onto on air straight afterwards. So they have to have the person in the room to film it, to vision mix it, all of that. Anyway, they're paying for that anyway. So the cost is not particularly different there. So for them, it's like, other than the cost of a person on live support for the day, there's no difference in cost for them of going live or going record. So it kind of depends on what the expectation is of the record as well. Is it a vision mixed record through a PIP, or is it a fixed camera angle, in which case there doesn't have to be a person in the room and it's cheaper? And so I think expectation is the key word there, Ali. It comes down to client delegate expectation, client expectation, budget expectation, and trying to marry it to find the best solution that kind of ticks all the boxes, or as many as possible. But I agree, Grant. I think there's a great case for on demand, with potentially an encore session where those people, then there's a panel discussion that from the questions that was submitted from people who watched. But that's the other thing, is that live Q&A is not really captured other than during a live session. So when you're watching a record afterwards, you're not tracking that activity the same way. And also in on air at the moment, the data is there for 3 months. So you have to be quite vigilant about capturing the information, exporting the data. Otherwise, you go in 6 months' time when your portal's still open and people are still watching, you're like, oh, why haven't I got the first 3 months of data? Because I haven't, it disappears. So yeah, whereas live data, watching a session live through hybrid, you're capturing it immediately. When you're watching it, you're seeing it in the agenda of the record. So I would love to see, if I know that On Air is probably not a project that's going to get worked on. On Air came at a time of need in COVID, and it was a great response to a very urgent need. But I would love for the watched recording data that's exactly the same. It tells us what time they started and what time they finished. If that could pull into an agenda section in Air, that would mean you could report on everything on the post recording on demand through the reports without going in through On Air analytics and trying, because when someone rings up and says, what have I watched, because I don't even know what I've watched, because it doesn't tell you. There's no summary for someone watching an On Air that doesn't tick box saying you've watched that one. Now when they want to go in and someone rings me and they go, oh, I don't know what I've watched and I'm about to do my CPD and I don't know, I have to go in and through analytics pull their attendee journey, and then I can export a spreadsheet and show that's what you've watched. But if it just pulled through to the agenda and events there, you could give them a live link to an online form that showed them that's what you've watched, that's your summary. So that's another area where, if you're staying within the on-air realm, there's some work that needs to happen. And Grant's probably got lots of thoughts on that, because you do lots of amazing things with data. But, for an end user just using events there, there's limitations there with just on demand with reporting CPD.
Yeah, CPD is a whole nother discussion, isn't it? Because it is related.
At some point.
Yeah. And there's a wider discussion about education in general, but in a fast developing world, and we're talking about AI and what do you need to know and what don't you need to know, and how do you assess whether someone knows something or not. All that stuff is super challenging, and I think it is changing. So CPD, I think, is going to change, because it's how are you proving that you know something. Is it just by watching content? It's probably not enough. And so it's an interesting one. Anyway, we've got off the track, but actually, the purpose of AirHeads actually is it's all these other things, right? That's connected to Events Air. It just happens that we're using Events Air, but we're always considering all these other things. So it's nice to be able to chat about some other stuff. Can
I just add to that? I'm interested, maybe this could be another session down the road, but I'm interested to see, from the data that I look at, notwithstanding there's a 3-month limit and then you got to sort of quickly dump it all and then do it again later. But I would put it out there that content being consumed is just that, it's consumable. They watch it on the plane on the way home, and then there's a drop off on post event, unless it's CPD. Don't get me wrong, that's a separate kettle of fish. But in terms of how many people are coming back to watch, that look at the content and review, it's getting less and less and less, and it tapers off very, very quickly. Unless you're a market researcher, from an organization, they'll go and check it out. Or 12 months later, should you still have it open, you then start to see, repeat offenders that might be presenting in come back and checking out what happened last year. And so there's a slight spike, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, whenever the next event is. But the actual in-between bit of content being consumed, not so much. It's interesting.
It's really interesting. And a lot of the times you'll watch actually the number of minutes that someone watches of a video, and it's really highlights people's attention span because it tends to be less than 10 minutes of an hour session. It's really interesting.
And I had this discussion recently. I was over in Perth doing this thing, and a bunch of counsellors, and I said, "Oh, we'll have the recordings up ready to go." And they go, "Oh, I won't get time to watch that." I went, "What are you talking about? You can watch it when you're out for a jog or at home." And they went, "Oh, no. I've been given X amount of hours to come to this event. I'm going to consume the time, the content during that time. Outside of that, I'm not doing it on the weekend. Or I'm not doing it." So it comes down to the industry and the types of people you're working with, but they have no desire to go back and look at the app afterwards because they're not getting paid to do it. So I found that really interesting as well. I guess it's generational, right?
I've had delegates told to me when they shouldn't have about their CVD is because it's they have to watch it. There's we were tracking the time that they were viewing and everything.
Yeah.
They put it on the background when they were in their rooms consulting patients and just mute it and then just having a look. I was like, you really shouldn't have told me that.
See, that's the other end. Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Ali, I have a client who they have to watch 35 minutes out of 60 to earn CPD and watch and post record. And there's no magic calculation that comes out of there. You're having to literally pull this report and sort it by the number of minutes watched. And for all I know, they've had it on. Yeah, they've got Netflix on at the same time. They've got it on mute. And interestingly, most clients don't even expect you to do that. They're like, well, I've bought my on demand, so there's my CPD. So they're actually paying their registration purely to tick the box, not actually to watch it. It's so interesting, isn't it? It's
but then that's the same concept as someone who registers an in-person delegate who rocks up on the first morning at 9 o'clock to pick up the name badge and you never see them again. It's the same methodology, and unfortunately, I think those people will always be there. And there's always a way that try to get around it. So you can't cover all your bases really.
They got their CPD, but they also had a great time snorkeling in the Great Barrier Reef.
100%, 100%.
Totally. Good one. All right. Is it any last comment or questions or anything that came up? Any thoughts? Nope. Good one. Nice one. Well, it is a soapbox for me, is talking about hybrid events. So that was a good one to get into. Didn't know that's where we were going to go, but that's good.
I'm keen to see a session down the track, Grant, on name badge creation, only because it's just something I've been doing right now.
There we go,
Maybe somewhere down the road we'll bring some popcorn and show us your badge. Show us your badge. Like, you know what I mean? I'm sure people are doing some awesome stuff in there, but I don't know. It could just be me.
CPD is definitely a session we should do in talking about self-scanning versus scanning people and how people are managing that, because that's my soapbox. I'm definitely passionate on getting the easiest system on site for people to check into sessions, but still do it ethically. So
do you do all your CPD using the EA modules alone, or do you connecting to something else or exporting to something else?
For some clients, will be connecting through to their membership systems, but extracting the data from Events here. But an actual session check-in, everything through the app, through Events here so far.
Oh, so just the check-in, but in the actual module in EA, do you use that?
Not using them. I've only had one client I've worked with years ago who had the membership module and was using that. And it was just no. Just no. I don't think that's had any love for many years, that module. I'm sure anyone from EA watching this would say it's probably not high on their list of, I don't know, maybe in overseas there's a greater demand for it, but within Australia, there's not many clients using it. I think we only had, in my time working for them, I only trained one person in the membership module, one company.
Interesting.
There you go. Well, we will do other topics, and we will but we'll never say that that it will be all inclusive or all encompassing of that topic, right? And that's my disclaimer to say that we revisit hybrid events multiple times, I'm sure. And so we'll see. We might do a CPD next week, or we'll see where it all lands. But very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. See you next week.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, gang.
Thanks, guys. Bye.